difference in terms of the duration of sentences and whatnot. Okay, so in Malaysia, the criminal law only belongs to the federal autonomy. All right, but in other country, the criminal law may be given the autonomy to the state, like the US. Okay, so in Malaysia, these are the powers of the state to enact laws related to Muslim, Sharia court, land, forestry, fisheries, and whatnot. And these are the concurrent lists: water supply, national parks, fire safety, okay, excuse me, and whatnot, and sports heritage housing. Okay. Now we move to subsidiary legislation very briefly. I'm sure you know what is subsidiary legislation. Anyone which is not clear about subsidiary legislation? Anyone? Silence means understand. Okay, with that? Okay, subsidiary legislation is basically the law that we may call it as rule, regulation, bylaws, orders, proclamation, notification that was introduced by the government agency, all right, government agencies, okay, or departments, where the power to come up with that rules, laws, come from a parent law. The parent law is the federal law. Okay, so I think I gave you already the examples in UITM. UITM is the parent law, and then you can see many rules and regulation. Rules in college, in your accommodation, college, residential college, and then you can have rules. The one that I've shown you, your attendance rules. All right, they have that peraturan, blah blah blah, and whatnot. These are all subsidiary legislation. The product of subsidiary legislation. The issues will be the power is kind of like unlimited power introduced to the YDBA, ministers, local authorities, UITM, the Hatiku. Okay. Having said that, you can try to sign in at UFuture if it is working. I think yesterday, uh, everyone is complaining that you cannot sign the U future. So don't worry much. For class yesterday was 2H and 2I, if I'm not mistaken. uh, I considered that you attended the class based on the number of the those who were present. Don't worry much about that. And later after Raya, you can sign the manual one. All right. So don't worry much about the attendance because there's some technical issues. As I mentioned to 2H and 2I, the whole UITM system is using the U Future because everyone was instructed that this week is an online classes, so many will utilize the U Future. So don't worry much. All right. This is one of the example of the subsidiary legislation, Minister of Communication, and then we have the Parent Law Communication and Multimedia Act 1998, and then they have a Communication and Multimedia Licensing Regulation 1999. Oh, I haven't changed the name of the. Sorry, I've changed, but I didn't save the name of the young Berhormat Ahmad Fahmi. Okay, sorry about that. I changed, but I think I haven't saved the um this PowerPoint. Okay, we have currently new Minister of Communication and Digital something. Okay, now we move to Judicial President. This have you studied this in your MLS?
Yes, madam. We have.
Yes, madam.
Okay, what is a Judicial President?
Judicial sidang. Judicial president.
I cannot hear you.
Sorry. Cannot hear.
Uh,
Judicial president. Sorry. Judicial president is a decision made by the judge where it's bind upon the lower court. Something like that. Is it correct?
Okay, basically yes, but not only lower court, uh, parallel also. Okay, when you say its own court also, let's say it is decided by high court, for example, then a parallel court equivalent also will be binding its own court. And also, let's say you have high court of Borneo and whatnot, it will be also binding, not only all the lower courts. Okay, so this is the structure, a very brief structure. I'm sure you have already done this. Unlike other country, Malaysian structure is pluralism structure, where you can see we have the civil court system, and then we also have the Sharia court system, which is actually outside the uh, civil court, and then we have the native court. Okay, those from Sabahan and Sarawakian. Have you ever came across the native court in Sabah or in Sarawak? Yes, no? Khas, panggilan khas kepada Sabahan dan Sarawakian. So Nafis tak boleh jawab. Ah, Sabahan, Sarawakian? Have you came across native court?
No, madam.
No. Dalam MLS tak ada belajar native court. Tak ada. Okay, but I won't be touching native court into detail. Just very brief. That it in Sabah and Sarawak they do have native court. Actually, in Peninsula back then we do have penghulu court, right? But it is not what shall I say, a formal mechanism. But unlike in native court in Sabah and Sarawak, it becomes what shall I say, a recognized court where training is given and whatnot. So it's a full-fledged, like the Sharia court, is functioning to address certain matters, but it has a unique way of what shall I say, indigenous features of the native court. Okay, if you are going to be penalized, the penalty will be in the form of what? You are to pay fine, but what kind of fine that you are going to pay? Any Sabahan Sarawakian? Do you know that? Or even Peninsula, those from Peninsula. Do you know anything about the native court and what kind of fine they introduce in native court? Ini tak ada jawab. Awak tak ada depan mata saya like usual. If not, I will call. Okay, green zone at the back. Tudung kuning. Terpaksa tudung kuning jawab. Okay, because I don't have the, what shall I say, leisure of switching from your the page online and here. Anyone? Do you know what kind? Okay, type at the chat box if you know. If you don't know, never mind. Anyone know what kind of a fine or penalty that will be imposed um, for native court in Sabah and Sarawak? Ada orang tulis kat chat box? Awak takkan sibuk buat ketupat kot. No answer?
Tak tahu.
Oh, tak tahu. Okay, okay. Okay, thank you. No one answer. Oh, saya siap pergi switch tengok. Just mana tahu you know that. Okay. Because there were, I did, you know when you are part 4 that you are going to do at part 4, part 5 that will do attachment for your industrial training. Is it part 4, part 5?
Part 4.
Part 4. We do have students that attach themselves to native court. So it becomes interesting. All right. So example, let's say contract of marriage. The contract of marriage is being breached, and the penalty is, for example, because I'm not well versed, but I kind of like knowing a little bit, like, is based on the structure of the houses, the structure of the house that the lady is staying. So berapa banyak tiang or something like that, I can't remember. But the penalty will be livestock. You will pay with livestock, like cows and whatnot. All right, it's not monetary. There's monetary, but they will be dealing with that kind of. So it's a very unique court system in Malaysia. If you like to study court system, do include native court in your study. Unlike other country, they may have it. I'm not sure, but Malaysia, we do have this indigenous native court system. Okay, enough about that native court system. Okay, you may have came across the stare decisis, like the decision stand, and as you say, it is binding. So it can be vertically, as Nafis mentioned, binding all the subordinate, the lower court, and horizontally, okay, its own chord, as well as similar coordinate, I mean to say at par. Okay, if it's a high chord, another high chord also can be bind, but not the upper chord, right? And you need to find the ratio die. I'm sure you have came across this, and this is about the finding the reasoning or the legal principle and the obiter dicta. All right, obiter dicta are non-binding. These are remarks by the judges. Okay, so you already been given your case review assignment. So the ground of judgment is about finding the ratio decedent die. All right. So for your ground of judgment, how the court arrived at that decision, what are the cases that the court refer to? Is there any specific test? Awak boleh buat ke tak assignment? Are you able to find?
Yes, madam. I think I found it, but I still not yet construct the structure yet. However, I found it, the law, the application, and all. However, I've not yet. Yes,
Okay,
construct.
itu Nafis jawab. Dia excellent. What about others? Are you do you have do you want me to brief you how to do the case review? If you need that, you inform me, okay, as I go along. If you need that, i I do conduct workshop for case review. All right, I do conduct workshop for case review. All right, now, okay, what's the time now? Saya tak ada pakai jam sini. uh, do you need to take a short break? This is a I'm moving to the part 2 of the discussion. If you are okay, I proceed. If you need to take 5 minutes break, we're going to have 5 minutes break. What say you? Proceed or break?
5 minutes break.
Okay, we take a 5 minutes break. Okay.
limited what can make you happy to that thing versus all the other things that could possibly happen won't make you happy. So you're just limiting yourself to a tiny little world, a tiny slice that things have to be exactly the way you want in order for you to do what? Open. That's the key. In order for me to be open. You use that word. You meet somebody, you say, oh, I felt so open with him and her or her. I'm so open about this new job. What do you think? You all talk about passion. What is passion? That you're open to the experience you're having. Then you feel all this joy. You feel all this passion well up inside of you. Why can't you feel that all the time? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to wake up in the morning and here's your attitude? I'm back. Well, I wonder what's going to happen today. This will be a lot of fun. I don't care. It's just going to be fun. I'm going to do my best at whatever's happening, and I'm going to interact with everybody and meet different people. You can do that. But if you limit yourself to what your preferences are, then you can only be happy with the things that match your preferences. So spirituality is not about renunciation of the outside world. Spirituality is about working on yourself to be more open. The more open you are, the more joy you feel. If you become completely open, unconditionally open, like the Dalai Lama, these really great beings, they just say it's about being happy. And so despite these terrible things that happen in the world, I'm going to start off by being open and not closing myself. Then I will do what I can to help. It's not that you don't come into the world. If you're filled with joy and filled with love, you're a blessing on this planet. You're a rarity. Whoever you meet is lifted. I mean, look, you meet people like Tony, and people have a lot of high energy, and you get that energy. You can be that all the time, except that you have defined yourself as someone who's limited to being happy if only certain things happen. So let's take a moment and talk about where you came up with your preferences. Talk about the psyche. You sit in there and you watch an ego. You watch a psyche. Freud talked about id, ego, and superego. Id being the desires and drives of the body, superego being what your society programmed you with, and the ego being the attempt to build a self-concept that can be okay between those things. You sit in there as a conscious being watching that all the time. That's what witness consciousness is, all right? That's what objective observation is. You have a state of being which is consciousness, and it is aware of what is going on inside your mind, is aware of what's going on inside your heart. If you start having trouble with your heart, I would tell everybody, don't come to me for therapy. You don't want to. If you came to me and said, my heart's killing me, my boyfriend or girlfriend left me, and I have all this pain in my heart, I know what I'm going to say to you. How do you know? How do you know that your heart hurts? And eventually you yell at me because I'm in here. I'm in here experiencing it, and I'll pranam to you. Because you who's in there experiencing it are not in pain. You're looking at and experience something that's in pain. So you are the objective observer, the consciousness, and you're watching this preference system that is limiting your ability to be happy. And it says all the time, I don't like that. Because it's been programmed with a preference system. How did that happen? I talked about that. Let's talk about how it really happens. You have experiences in your life that are not comfortable. Throughout your life, you've had various experiences that are anywhere from slightly uncomfortable to traumatic. You don't like experiencing that. That's not a nice experience. So what you do inside is you push the experience away. The experience happened. The outside actually happened. You can't stop that, but you don't have to let it come all the way into you. You don't have to experience it fully. You have hands inside, and you can push away these experiences once they come inside of you. You push away the energy of the experience, and that's called suppression. Repression or suppression, I call it just resistance. You resist the events. Do you know where they go? Again, you're advanced. I don't have to go into great detail. Those impressions that came into you, and now they're in there, and you push them away because you don't experience them, are literally going into the channel where your Shakti comes from. They're going into the upward, where all that beautiful upward flow of energy you have inside of you, you're blocking it with those things you push inside. Every one of them. If you sit there and say, I don't like the weather, you're not happy. If you sit there and say, I don't like what you did, you're not happy. Every single experience you have that you can't handle, that you resist, is pushed down on top of this beautiful energy flow that you have inside of you. That's the deepest thing I have to say to you, right? Every single thing you resist. The car in front of you is driving slower than you want. It's hotter than you want it to be. Somebody said something, at least you think they did, that you might not like. Every single one of those, you are resisting the experience that you're having, and that resistance builds up inside of you. And that resistance is what blocks your energy. And that's the bottom line of learning. You can do all the techniques you want. When it's said and done, as long as you are doing that, you will never reach unconditional happiness. Why? Because you said so. You said,
Okay, we continue. So long. I'm switching to the other page. Okay, before break, we look into the concept of the written constitution, and then we look into the sources of unwritten constitution, where it includes the state constitution, legislation, and then we have subsidiary, and now we are going to move into convention. Have you ever came across the word convention before?
Yes, madam.
What?
Uh,
What kind of convention that you ever came across?
Convention of what? Forget.
Anyone else? Anything? It doesn't need to be a serious thing, like as long as it carries the word convention. Anyone? Tak ada? Ada? Hmm. Have you ever came across the word Shah Alam Convention Center? Tak ada.
Sorry. I suddenly remember is Convention of Geneva, something like that.
Oh, that
Genevieve.
is the international convention,
Yes.
right? We do have also convention as a structure building. Shah Alam Convention Center, Kuala Lumpur Convention Center, Putrajaya Convention Center. These are the structure buildings. And we do have Geneva Convention and whatnot. These are international convention. So not to be confused with constitutional convention. So what is a constitutional convention? Basically, these are the binding usages, the practices of the parliament. If I can say it, in Malay, it is like adat-adat ahli parlimen. So it is not law, amalan ahli parlimen or ahli politik. Okay, whether it is adat, the custom, or amalan. All right, practices of the parliamentary member mostly are the parliament member, member of the parliament that we are looking into. So these are not laws. It is not formal law that passed by parliament. These are what are the practices, the usages. Okay, so it becomes rules or political practice. They are not laws, right? And it becomes constitutional or political ethics. Prof. Shad said that it becomes constitutional morality of the day. All right, these are non-legals. No constitution can provide everything. Why? Because you can see constitution cannot fit every each of the law rules and by law. So constitution is just very basic. So it requires certain aspect, including constitutional convention. Okay, the greater the degree of the constitutional rigidity, the greater the need for the convention to comes in. If the law is too rigid, so in order to execute the law, you need to be based on what have been the practices before, what have been this and whatnot. Okay, in life, this is something that is common. But we are talking about parliamentary members. But if I'm to make analogy, like in life, what are your practices? So that are not law. Okay, let's say your practices is, oh, I do have my mentee. Okay, I'm sure have you met your mentor, your lecturer, academic advisor? So I do have my mentee has this practices of running. Okay, in a week he will have this running exercise for, let's say, three times in a week. So that is his practices. So it becomes he becomes his aim, a must to him that he must be running for 3 times in a week. So that is his practices. Is there something that you need to do in a day, or something that you need to do in a week? Anyone would like to share? I'll write at the chat box. I can have a look later. Uh, what are your practices that it becomes something that it is not law, it is not what your mother wants you to do, or your father wants you to do, or anybody wants you to do, but it becomes your something that you know, I need to do this. So either it is daily, for example, okay, sorry ni bulan puasa tapi senang nak ambil example. People have this very common, I need to have coffee in the morning, example. So that becomes, if no coffee you feel like um you are missing something like that, so that is one of example of practices. So that is on daily basis, and you can have like a week practices, whatever you like to do, swimming, you like to do sewing, or whatever hobby that you like. Or I think, is there any social media influencer in this class? I need to update status at IG, TikTok, blah 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 every day on daily basis on whatever. Okay, so it becomes a must to you. Saya dengar bunyi satu je, ting. What about the rest? Share your practices at your chat box. All right. So this now you are looking at the lens of the member of parliament. As you know, member of parliament is yang berhormat, yang berhormat. As the wakil rakyat, as the yang berhormat, what will be the practices? How they go about as the yang berhormat? What are the common practices that it becomes a must? They must follow as yang berhormat. All right. So here, if it is the law is so rigid, so it requires this convention in order for them to interpret the law into practices. All right. So that's the requirement. So under Sir Ivor Jennings, it is stated that it becomes source of constitutional law. In other jurisdiction, these practices, because it's like people follow, the members follow, it become bound to, like, my analogy is your coffee in the morning. You become bound to have coffee. If you know, if you don't have coffee in the morning, you are going to have like um not in the mood, for example. And I can relate back to the video that I just shared just now. How do you define your happiness? You define your happiness if you confine your happiness to a very small box. So then your happiness will be somehow framed into a small box. So try to expand your happiness. Like, yeah, that's why something like I said, if you cannot get coffee in the morning, your mood swing, you don't feel happy, something like that. If I can make analogy, sorry lah. Consti campur, I mean, blended with something else, but that is somehow it also can relate to this. Like, what is the practices of the young berhormat, the member of the parliament? So it become bound by them to do that. So to a certain extent, although it's practices, like we do have adat, if you can say, like, I think every each of us, you belong to a certain race, right? We have Malay race, and the Sabahan Sharawakian, you have different, but not only Malay race. On top of Malay race, I think we are very, what shall I say, have a different ethnic Okay, even in Peninsula we have slightly different ethnic, and you do have your adat, you do have your custom. To a certain extent, certain family follow this custom. So that too goes for this um, yang berhormat. They have certain custom, there are certain usages that they, if they don't follow, is something missing there. Okay, so however, okay, in the UK, obviously there are so many convention, as you know, because UK doesn't have a proper written constitution, it's all scattered. So then the crown, the queen, will act on advice of the prime minister. That becomes one of the convention. But in Malaysia, this has already turned into a law under Article 40. All right. So, Sir Ivor Jennings said that the convention are the flesh which clothes the dry bone of the law. So the law are very skinny. So you need the flesh to cover, to clothe the dry bone. And so the flesh here comes from the one that we discussed before is the constitutionalism. And now we are looking into the convention to complete, to supplement the skinny bone. All right. So in the UK, again, the discretionary power of the monarch, um, in the statutes. Okay, in Malaysia, uh, this has already been turned into law under Article 66. Just now that I mentioned, within 30 days, if the YDPA kept quiet, silent about this matter, within that 30 days, that particular bill will turn into law. So back then in the UK, this is a convention. It becomes the discretionary power of the monarch, and it becomes a convention that the monarch will usually approve the law. All right, that becomes the convention. Okay, and also act on advice of the minister, so that also become a convention of in the UK, but not in Malaysia. It's already converted, adopted into law. Convention enable informal changes. Since it's not law, it's so easy for you to change. Let's say you are being consuming coffee. Suddenly someone introduce you to this very special teh tarik. Sorry lah ya, belum puasa tapi senang nak buat analogy. Teh tarik, and you find it like quite nice. So you change from coffee to teh tarik because doctor said you're becoming addicted to coffee, so you have some a little bit of health issues, so you change to teh tarik example. All right. So you enable informal changes can easily be made because these are not law. Okay. Convention can give rise to law. Convention can also convert the convention into statutory rules. For example, back then, okay, we do. I'm sure you have came across this before. Royal immunities. Back then, there's no special court. What is the convention? So for all the royals, okay, the convention duty is to act with dignity and restraint, not to get into trouble. We can use that layman term. All right. Since there's issue with that, in 1993, the Prime Minister suggested that the amendment to Article 181 and introduce a special court, meaning to say the convention is not being followed, at the end of the day, a special court is being set up or follow, meaning to say the royals can be executed, but under a special court. All right. Now, what are the rules here? A convention here define the ambit of the constitutional discretion. As you know, the constitutional discretion is this. So it define what are the practices, how to go about, what is the manner to do this, matters about this, matter about that. Okay. So in the UK again, it becomes a convention that, as I mentioned earlier, that the monarch will give her assent to a bill. So in Malaysia, this has to turn into law under Article 66. So here, convention help to ensure constitutionalism, rule of law, and also limited government. Now, convention in Malaysia, uh, we have converted the convention of uh, to act on advice of the minister or cabinet into Article 40, Clause 1. And although it has been converted, but still we do have convention because the wording here to act on advice of the cabinet or a minister. But conventionally, the YDPA will refer to the prime minister. So the prime minister will get the exclusive rights of audience with the king. So that is convention. It's not stated under the law. The law only provide that the YDPA must act on advice of cabinet or minister. Conventionally, the one that met the YDPA was the prime minister. Okay, it's not written, only cabinet and or a minister. Example, cabinet meets once a week every Wednesday. As simple as that. So they have meeting every Wednesday. Example. Okay, I won't be reading every each of this. And passing of bills. So there can be internal rules and there can be convention of the houses where how they go about. First reading, second reading, as you know, a tedious process to complete the bill, to turn bill into law, okay, to turn bill into an act. Okay, they will have convention, okay, in the house. As you know, convention has no formal machinery. How do you determine the, what shall I say, not the validity, the existence, whether it is still in existence or not? Sir Avajani suggested first look into the frequency of it. Is it a single precedent or is it being repeated again and again? Okay, do actors in the precedent believe that they are world bound, like the coffee thing? You must have it. So it's nothing, it's not rule, but you must have it because it's your practices. So here the actors bound felt that the need to adhere, need to follow, although it is not law. And there's a reason for that. All right. So if we fulfill all these criteria, then the the convention is still in existence. Okay. And it can have major changes and it can lose its binding force. All right. So uh, if the convention is not being followed, what happened? It's not law. So then there's no proper mechanism, there's no police, there's no charges and whatnot. But if they break it, what happened? All right. So convention can be modified or destroyed by act of parliament. All right. Uh, Although these are practices, but they can be law that somehow not in favor of the convention. So the convention obviously won't prevail. The act or the federal law provision will prevail. Why people obey the convention? Okay, because to a certain extent it may encounter political difficulties. All right. For example, a member of parliament met every Wednesday. You don't want to follow every Wednesday, you come every Thursday. There's nobody there to do the meeting, for example. So it may encounter political difficulties. The consequences are more commonly political. All right. It might lead to changes in the law. Yeah, it might lead to changes of the law. So the member of parliament, out of respect, out of the fear of this dispute and whatnot, or force of habit, they will follow. So it becomes a convention. These are examples I pick up many years ago. Okay, the convention is because nowadays the state will the state rulers, political party might not be similar with the federal, okay, political party of the rulers. So back then, it's mostly similar. Okay, now you can have state from a position, then you have the federal from this and whatnot. So here, back then, okay, after election, usually the prime minister will make recommendation for the Menteri Besar, especially if the state belongs to that similar political party. That is the convention. But what happened in 2008? The recommended Menteri Besar was Dato Idris Yusof, but the Sultan refused to follow the Prime Minister suggested name. So the Sultan of Terengganu, Tuanku Mizan, appointed Ahmad Said. All right. So you can see uh, this is dealing with YDBA. If breach, what happened? No, nothing happened in this case. Back then, in Selangor crisis, I'm not sure whether you follow this, the Kajang move, they call it. All right. Uh, when the Menteri Besar of Selangor was somehow stepped down, they proposed Datuk Sri Wan Aziza to become the Menteri Besar. However, Wan Aziza did not contested for Dewan Undangan Negeri. So there was a by-election to accommodate Dr. Wan Aziza to qualify to be the Menteri Besar of Selangor. However, okay, Sultan of Selangor refused and requested more names until the appointment of Datuk Sri Muhammad Azmin. These are all history, eh? I just give you an example. And then after Azmin, it was Datuk Sri Amiruddin. And you can see these are the newspaper cutting uh, uh, based on that ceremony. You can see the last sentence. The palace always abides by the rule of law and convention in I'm not sure what is the sentences there, involve itself, probably avoiding involve itself in political issues. All right, so you can see the recognition made at by the palace, a recognition made of the existence of convention. This is referring to Constitutional Convention, not Geneva Convention, not SACC, and whatnot. All right. This is just a glance back then. My notes prepared was earlier, okay, where Don M stepped down. Do we have some kind of convention here? And after few prime ministers stepping down, do you think we have certain convention? I leave it to you to think about that. Okay, now breathe in, breathe out. Okay, give enough oxygen to your body. Enough oxygen will make your blood circulation better. But if you do exercise, more better, right? Like my mentee, when he said he ran a few times in a week. Wow, I was like, yeah. Okay, now what is the relationship between law and the convention? Okay, convention rules govern conduct and control limit executive discretion. By having the practices, executive knows the boundary. So how does this matter being dealt with? How this matter be decided and whatnot? So they have a convention to refer to. So convention are non-legal rules regulate the way which legal rules work, and they supplement the law. Okay, because the law is so rigid, so they supplement the law, and they obey the every each of the member will obey based on consent because there's no legal enforcement and whatnot. So, but to a certain extent, the court recognized convention as its to interpretation by virtue of Regina against Secretariat, by virtue of Tun Datuk Mustafa. We have a Malaysian case here. The court may adopt a convention. So it becomes very clear the judiciary in Malaysia recognize the function of the convention to the extent that it can be adopted and it can be a source of law. All right. And then we have the Canadian case. So there are few cases, Malaysian case. Then we have a English case. We have a Canadian case. Okay. If the court finds the relevant convention exists, court may recognize its existence. All right. But Malaysia has made promise. Court may adopt the convention. So, but this was this discussion. The court consider external aid is necessary and it become necessary to consider whether constitutional convention as it's submitted exists as an aid for and background to constitutional construction here. Okay. However, this was mentioned, this meaning to say the court don't hesitate or reluctant to appreciate convention. So court is open to appreciate convention. All right. Uh, However, in this case, it is stated that that they don't follow the convention because there's no urgency or need to follow. But the court recognized the existence of the convention. Now, the convention, Dewan Rakyat is dissolved for election, and then the uh, caretaker government will be in power for 120 days. All right. So this convention has partial recognition under Article 43 2B. Who usually becomes the caretaker government? Are you familiar with that term, caretaker government? I'm giving the example here. Are you familiar?
Maybe YDPA, is that correct? Or how? No.
No, no, not correct. All right. Okay. Let us look at this. Once a parliament is dissolved, you need someone to run. You cannot have country without. You do have YDPA because YDPA power and existence are based on the rotational basis. It doesn't has any effect or whatsoever relationship with the dissolution of parliament. All right. So here, by virtue of 43 2A or 2B, once a parliament, if you can recall, I discussed under basic features. Once a parliament is dissolved, all the powers to the existing member of parliament cease. They no longer become the member of parliament. All right. So here, by virtue of 43, it is stated that since we are to wait for the election and complete all the process, so there will be a lacuna period. There's no government because we have already uh, dissolved Buba parliament. So who is going to take care of the government? Anything goes wrong and whatnot, the YTPA is in the picture, yes, but you need the government to run. So then the conventionally is to appoint member of the last House of Representative to take the lead. So obviously, if you can recall, after our election, after dissolution of parliament, who becomes the caretaker in Malaysia? Back then, based on the previous general election.
If I'm not mistaken, the first one is Muhyiddin Yassin. After that, Zahid Hamidi. After the court had been dissolved, something like that. After,
Okay.
sorry, the parliament dissolved.
Caretaker only takes place after dissolution of parliament. So who becomes the existing prime minister after the dissolution of parliament? Can you follow what I'm talking about caretaker? It's referring to who is the prime minister while waiting for the election to complete and all the process of election to complete. Okay, you need to somehow conduct election. All right, so we're waiting for that to complete. Who becomes our prime minister?
Was it not Ismail Sabri?
Yes, the last prime minister will become the caretaker prime minister. All right, so this is the convention. Okay, it's not like it's like it doesn't clearly say the prime minister must come from uh, the former prime minister, but the wording is partially partially recognition saying member of the last House of Representatives. So it's referring to the former Prime Minister. Conventionally, you can interpret that it is referring to the former Prime Minister. Okay. Breathe in, breathe out. Okay. Now, we are going to look into the differences between law and convention, and are there any exception? Exception means like this. Law you can bring to court. What is the exception? Where law you cannot bring to court. Convention, general, cannot go to court. But exception, like the case of Tun Datu Mustafa, where the court accepted that convention, so can bring to court, and something like that. We're going to look into that. First, law enforceable judiciary. You can go to court. Okay. Convention unaccompanied by judicial sanction. No going to court. All right. Only sanction that can be to address this is political sanction. All right. The case of government of Kelantan, government of Federation of Malaysia. That's another case dealing with that. Okay. What is the convention of buying cars for the ministry? Government ministry. What is the convention? Do you know? If the government agency is to buy cars, what is the convention? What kind of cars they must buy?
Proton.
Huh?
Proton.
National cars. All right.
Yeah,
Okay, good,
proton.
good. What happen if you don't follow? Menteri Besar Terengganu. Okay. As you know, the Menteri Besar Terengganu is not the one that is chosen by the Prime Minister, the one that I shared just now. Menteri Besar Terengganu at that point of time, Ahmad Said decided to purchase 14 Mercedes to replace the existing Proton Perdana. What happened? Ah, this is an example of a political sanction. Who is the VVIPs?
The VVIPs, maybe Prime Minister and also the YDPA. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, for sure. Or any foreigner, diplomat, or whoever that is visiting, right? So, what is the political sanction? What is the political sanction?
Maybe political sanction is when the political power of the certain party has been limited or has been completely kena pulau macam tu. Macam tu ke?
In this context, ni political sanction ni. In this context, where the Ahmad Said bought the Mercedes, what is the political sanction on top of that they cannot use back? They must use back their old cars. That is one. But here, how? What is the political sanction example here? Under here.
He cannot use the Mercedes.
Yes, that is the example of a political sanction. Okay, but it's here you can see it's not legal, but it's a political. Okay, must use back Proton Perdana, and then VVIP is the Prime Minister coming down, YDPA, whoever. All right. So now look into the distinction again. As you can see, law justiciability can bring to court, but convention cannot. Alright? So, however, exception. Ni kita tengok terbaliknya. Convention cannot bring to court, but they are cases where convention receive judges recognition. All right, convention receive judges recognition and use as an aid to interpret statute. That's an assumption. And then judicial review, exclusion of judicial review. Okay, there are certain part, okay, under the law and whatnot, where it should be enforced fully, but exception they can exclude judicial review. Judicial intervention is impossible, yeah, for the convention. It's not easy to intervene. Okay, it's based on what kind of what shall I say, um, breach of it. Okay, and then example 153. Okay, the special position of the Malay and Sabah and Sarawak, it is so broad, assuming the interpretation here is so broad. So it requires the YDPA to narrow what is it about Sabah and Sarawak and whatnot, the 153. So using convention, it assisted the YDPA based on what was practices before. Political sanction, okay, there are certain situations that they receive political sanction. Okay, now furthermore, law, if you don't follow, it still exists. But convention, you don't follow, cease to exist. Method, okay, law, uh, totally, as we have discussed, being somehow enacted at parliament and whatnot. And convention, no formal ways. Any ways can come up with convention. Flexibility, convention are more flexible. Okay, interpretation, breach of law is being somehow uh, can be externally or can be authoritatively determined. So meaning to say, you can have enforcement officer coming to your place and look at, for example, eh, uh, here under the interpretation breach of law, you can you have a, what shall I say, predictability. So you can predict, okay, if someone is not following this law, there can be penalty of this. So it's predictability, more transparent. But convention is self-interpreted. If you don't follow, it's like it might not be anything happen to you, it might be having some political sanction. Okay, in terms of certainty, breach of convention, there's no certainty. Okay, and general system, convention has no general system. Okay, so when Tone M decided to introduce Tommy Thomas, it becomes like the discussion of the spotlight discussion. So back then, they were arguing blah blah blah, although uh, the post of AG was conventionally, then you can use formally, conventionally. Okay, but when Tommy Thomas, even you can include Bumi Putra, but this is Tommy Thomas. Okay, so the Tone M proceed with that, and the king was kind of reluctant actually. All right, they are conference of rulers also giving opinion, but at the end of the day the king consented. But this just to show that there can be argument that this is not convention, although they have appointment back then for non-muslim. Okay, but this at the end of the day, but this is old story, not the current one. Okay, because this old story can shows that the king are not happy with the choice of Tommy Thomas in a way, all right. Nothing much. What about prime minister? Must the prime minister be Muslim?
No.
Can you appoint a Chinese as the prime minister?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So conventionally, the prime minister is Malay Muslim. Conventionally, right? At any time, it can change. All right, nothing much here, just to show you that the power of the executive. All right. So that's basically the end of the discussion. Okay. Um, I won't take your time further, as you know that all the system of your ITM is using future and is heavy. If you can sign at future, please do so. But if you cannot, don't worry much about that. All right, you can later sign um, when you come back after Raya, because the system is not working, so it's beyond control. So we won't be like I won't be forcing you to try again and again. Okay. What's your okay? Oh,
Uh,
saya pun nak baca.
Mariam, saya nak tanya.
Dah pergi gym. Okay, saya pun nak baca. Running, Zaid, good. Write down highlights. Fatiha swimming, good on you. Okay, yes. Anyone would like to ask?
Ya, jadi conventions ni adalah it's not necessarily in written form. It's just generally accepted practices, is it? Dia tak ada
Correct.
legal flag. So
No.
in what form does it take? Dia macam ada like agreement ke, kena sign, tak ada. Just general
Yeah,
consensus je of how it should be.
yeah, correct. You follow that. It becomes a must. And is well known by the member of parliament. Like if I make the analogy of you coffee, like example, do you have agreement to drink coffee every day? Like your mom knows, for example, your mom knows you need to drink coffee. So your mom prepare the coffee, example. There's no agreement whatsoever. That goes for the um, member of the parliament. But there can be, what shall I say, minutes of meeting where you can have some kind of like black and white what would be practices by them. It is reflected in their minutes of meeting where they have meeting and whatnot. It can be reflected, but it is not uh, a must to put it into writing. But if you have go through, they will have discussion, they will have many aspects where that also can become the convention, and you have evidence of it in that sense, the black and white, but not law. All right. Anyone else would like to ask? No, yes? Okay. All right. So keep up your good, what shall I say, good, but not all of you are sharing here, only few only, sharing your good practices. Nafis Zaid Hamidi. Ya. Tiba-tiba Zaid Hamidi. Saya diam je, saya tanya orang lain lah. Okay. Keep up your good work, like swimming, writing down, running, gym. Do you go to gym, Nafis?
Kalau
Oh,
ikut saya punya, insyaAllah. Kadang-kadang bagi rumah ya, sikit-sikit.
dekat rumah, tak. I mean at UITM.
UTM ada, dia ada dekat kuliah kediaman tu. UCP je.
Oh, it near to your college kediaman? Or
Yes,
the gym that is like near to our faculty? Kan ada gym yang satu near to our faculty, do you know that?
open at most at the evening, almost to afternoon, something like that. So
Yes.
I really don't have time to go there. However, in College Kediaman we have a very gym. I think all College Kediaman have a gym, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Okay. Good on you. All right. If not, you don't need to go to the gym. You use whatever that is outside. Angkat berat, cari barang berat, you angkat berat. For example. All right. Okay. Just joking. Okay. So with that, I thank you. I'll be meeting to G and to apa yang belum buat lagi tutorial? Another
To
two groups
H,
at 2
to
o'clock.
to H.
Yes, 2H, 2334. And with that, selamat Hari Raya. Selamat berbuka. Enjoy yourself, okay? And come back with one piece. And I hope you know how to do your assignment. The ratio decidendi, find ground of judgment is the ratio decidendi. It cannot be too short, all right? Because you are explaining how the court arrived at the decision. So it cannot be like one page only for the ratio decidendi. Part of it, ground of judgment, not only on ratio, you can also include obiter dicta and the important discussion by the court. Okay? So with that, I thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Thank you,
wabarakatuh,
madam.
madam. Selamat raya, madam. Lupa nak Pak.
Thank
Raya.
you, madam.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you,
Raya.
madam.